everyone, and welcome. My name is Simone Cowan, and I'm a teen advisor for Girl Up. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm 17 years old, and I'm a senior in high school. Today, we're joining in the launch of Action 2015, a movement made up of thousands of individuals and organizations united in the common belief that decisions taken in 2015 are critical for our future. Our panel, called Investing in Girls 2015 and Beyond, will take a look at the challenges adolescent girls face around the world, their needs, and the importance of investing in their future through their inclusion in the Sustainable Development Goals. If you're watching, please tweet along with us with the hashtag Action2015. Now, let's hear from our incredible panelists. Denise, would you please introduce yourself and give us a bit of background on what you do?
Absolutely. I'm really excited to get to be here with all of you. So my name is Denise Stunning, and I am the founder and executive director of Let Girls Lead, based here in California at the Public Health Institute. And what we do essentially is invest in girls and their allies around the world so that girls can raise their voices and advocate for their own rights in the areas of health, education, economic empowerment, and overall welfare more broadly.
That's great. Thank you. Karen, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. My name is Karen Fredrickson, and I'm a senior advisor at the United States Agency for International Development, working in our Office of Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment. And what I do is I really serve as an advocate on a daily basis to promote sustainable development by engaging women and girls.
Great. Thank you so much. Now, Vivian, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. My name is Vivian Onano. I'm a youth advisor to UN Women Global Civil Society Advisory Group. And as a youth advisor, my main duty is to engage young people on gender equality and women empowerment in relation to the work that UN Women is doing.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Hazami, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is very exciting, and congrats to the amazing team behind this. My name is Hazami Barama, and I'm a strategy and communications consultant, and I'm currently working with the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth in the United Nations on looking at creating campaigns to advocate for youth inclusion in the development process, but then also looking at all the various ways that you can mobilize young people to be avid creators of their own futures and include them into mainstream conversations.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, so this conversation is all about investing in girls in 2015 and beyond. But why invest in girls? Karen, would you like to start us off?
Sure. It's a fairly well-known fact that investing in girls is an incredible investment and to achieve our development goals. We know that investing in girls means that they will be healthier, their children will be healthier. If a better educated girl is going to create more income for her and her family, she'll make a big difference. It has a ripple effect for not only her, but her own family, her community, and the economy in general.
Definitely. I totally agree. What about you, Vivian?
Interesting. So when you talk about investing in girls, have you ever realized that every time when you want to do something for girls, we have to question why do we have to? There's no day I've been on a panel and they've asked, why do you have to invest in boys? So it's very interesting. I mean, looking at the conversation from that angle, but it's imperative to invest in a girl child because we're also investing in a boy child. Just the same way a boy child needs to go to school, the girl also equally needs to go to school. And investment in girls should be holistic because we should make sure that girls have access to quality education, have access to quality health, have access to clean water and sanitation, and have access to safe shelter. When you look at cases of violence, the first people who are always attacked are women and girls. They're raped, they're used, and we have to make sure that for our girls to actually achieve their full potential, they are secure in the environment that they're living, and they have equally the same opportunities as the boy child to be able to achieve full potential, and also to be able to be equally as successful and participate in the development of their own community. If a girl is not educated, the girl doesn't have a voice. And if she doesn't have a voice, then we are leaving a huge population out of development. And because of that, we cannot talk of achieving sustainable development goals if we don't involve the girl child and make her also give her a seat at the table and make sure she has full and maximum participation. So it's very, very vital and integral to invest in girl child. And I hope that moving on, as we move on from Millennium Development Goals to Sustainable Development Goals, we are going to reach a point where we don't have to ask the question, why do we have to invest in girls? We have to do it because it's the right thing to do.
That's a great point. That's really good. Nobody ever asked, why do we invest in boys? So that's great. What about you, Hazami? Why do you think we should invest in girls?
I mean, I echo Vivian's comment in asking why not. I mean, we're talking about 900 million people are girls that are under the age of 15. 900 million, that's a large subset of people. Half the world's population is women, and so when you're looking at demographic realities of our world, gender is such a cross-cutting issue. Women's issues and girls' issues impact education, they impact healthcare, they impact employment, they impact trafficking, human rights across the board. So when we're looking, and I think it's very important to make sure that when we're talking about youth, also youth are 1.8 billion people around the world are young people. So you can't talk about youth or girls or women as kind of subsets of society. They are society. So we need to start referencing all of these realities as such. How can you have strategic and development goals that do not include half of the global population? So that being said, I think it's very important to look at trends also in investing in women, not just investing into their education, but also we need to really start questioning why we're not investing financially into development of women. The Grameen Bank in Bangladesh is a great example, and they have wonderful, I love reading their updates on investing in women, but they say that women loan, I think 95% of the loan takers from the Grameen Bank are women. And they're more reliable, they spend their money more efficiently and more wisely, and they are able to also educate their youth on how to be more sustainable and how to make better choices for their own livelihoods. So I think we need to really shift the conversation precisely to what Vivian was saying, and also mirroring what Karen was saying, to really start considering how do we mainstream these conversations? How do we actually stop talking about investing in girls as a fringe program and rather as part of the main development?
Yes, I totally agree with what you said, definitely. Denise, why do you think we should invest in girls?
Well, I think my panelists have spelled it out really well, the fellow panelists. I would say, to me, it's two questions. One, it's the right thing to do, and two, it's the smart thing to do. Girls around the world, just like my own two daughters, have the right to go to school, deserve equal access to education, healthcare services, deserve to have the right to say, I'm 12 years old, I'd rather be learning how to read and do math rather than getting married to a man who's twice my age. So I think there's a very basic question of rights. And then secondly, it's really the smart thing to do. So all the research demonstrates that investing in girls is the greatest return on investment that we as a global development community actually have, right? So evidence from the World Bank shows that girls who go to school for 7 years, so basic primary education, will get married 4 years later and have 2.2 fewer children than the girl next door who doesn't have those opportunities. And so really investing in girls is our most effective strategy to break those intergenerational cycles of poverty and to empower girls to achieve their own full potential, to transform their own lives, their families, their communities, and the world. And I think, to me, the question of investment is really critical because despite incredible research, despite a lot of rhetoric, a lot of global leaders are talking about investing in girls, we also know that only 2 cents on the dollar in international funding actually goes to programs that benefit girls. So I think the time has really come, and I was really excited about this conversation as a way to really focus on that critical piece of not just believing that it's right and talking about it, but actually funding the programs that need to be in place to ensure that girls can achieve their full empowerment and therefore benefit their families and their communities and their own national development goals.
Those are excellent points, definitely. So now I would like to know, how does your work address the needs of girls and invest in them to transform their lives, communities, and their countries? And what exactly are the impacts of your work? Karen, would you like to start us off?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I mean, as a development agency, that's exactly what we spend all of our days doing in and out, is helping people around the world. And so for adolescent girls in particular, we really view this as helping the whole girl, every aspect of her transition from as a young girl to young adulthood. And so our nutrition programs, our education programs, both primary and secondary, help girls. Our health programs, our economic empowerment programs, our leadership programs, all are about investing in women and girls to achieve their goals and have a better life. And we really feel we've had a big impact. We've had projects on delaying child marriage that have been very effective in passing laws to increase the age at which girls should be married. We've had a lot of effective work done in terms of primary education completion, but not only that, improving literacy. And we're also working very hard to ensure that girls go on to secondary education as well, because that's really the critical linchpin. It's kind of the age of 12 that we really view as a critical path in the life of a young girl, in which either she can take the path of getting educated, going on, having a great job, marrying later, having children later, or she ends up in a situation where perhaps she's forced into an early marriage. And her path is very, very different in that respect. So our goal is to really help the whole girl and help her through all the stages of her life be able to be successful.
Okay, that's great. That's really, really awesome. What about you, Vivian?
Just to follow up on what Karen has said, investing in girls to make them successful. And Karen, I would like to shoot a question back to you. How do you define a successful girl? Because that has also been a very big question.
That is a very good question. I think a successful girl, in our opinion, is someone who's been able to make her own life choices, who's been able to have her own voice and decision-making power about what she'd like to do. And a girl who really is able to move on with her life and not be forced into an early marriage, but be able to get an education, better understand what she wants out of life, and achieve her own personal goals.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think that's awesome. What about you, Hazami?
I forgot to unmute myself there. I think I approach the work slightly differently. So I'm a communications and strategy professional. Ultimately, the work that I do is to try to get other people to care. And so we support, and through kind of creative campaigns, it's really about supporting work of some of the phenomenal people that are on this group, for example, and really figuring out, how do you preach beyond the choir? How do you take this message, which is such a central one, and put it in the ears of people that don't want to hear it, that don't want to invest in women, that are not putting forth the resources, that are in the decision-making capacities, and all applaud women's empowerment, yet don't support it tangibly. And I think the onus is on us as a community and as grassroots professionals and as a society to start asking for more accountability, to start asking for track records, and honestly calling out those who do not fulfill their commitments yet constantly make them. So from my approach in the public affairs space, it's really about educating large majorities of people through creative campaigns, through grassroots initiatives, through mobilizing people on social media, which never before has the world been so connected in history as is on social media. And then following on those trends. Twitter, for example, is most popular in Saudi Arabia. It has the deepest penetration in the world in a place like Saudi Arabia, which is repressive and doesn't necessarily allow freedom of expression. So a big part of, I think, what we need to do more of is look at societal trends and how we can insert these very important messages into these areas that are very hard to reach and are not being reached. And again, it's wonderful that we can have these conversations in boardrooms and in meeting rooms and in summits and that sort of thing. But the reality is most oppressive practices against women are happening in places that A, will never hear your conversation, and B, will never listen to it or take it seriously. So I think the onus is on us to work more collaboratively together to really enforce and reinforce each other's work, but more importantly, to really figure out how do you actually influence agendas? How do you actually bring women into positions of power, into decision-making capacities? You know, where you have in the United States, for example, such a dismal and embarrassing % of women CEOs in what considers itself one of the most free and just countries in the world and most empowering for women, where in this country we still have backlash and outrage about the thought of a woman president, yet we trumpet our, you know, freedom of women card around the world to countries that, yes, on a societal level are seemingly more oppressive, yet have women in positions of power. So I guess that, you know, you brought up the question, what is an empowered woman? And I think it's important to have this discussion. It's important to think about how do you actually bring women into these positions of power, where at this very day we have less than 22% of elected officials around the world are women. That needs to change. We need to start bringing women into decision-making capacities and really elevate the conversation. And that's a big part of the work that I do in partnership with many amazing, phenomenal organizations.
Wow, that's awesome. And I had no idea Twitter was so big there. I actually just created a Twitter so I could promote Girl Up more and tweet Action 2015 as well. So
congratulations.
So now I was
2015.
Thank you. I had an Instagram, I just never had a Twitter. So, but now I would love to know what drives your passion to improve girls' lives around the world. So Denise, why don't you start us off?
Sure. So I started Let Girls Lead about 5 years ago because I really truly believe that girls have the power to change the world. And I think there's a lot of attention now focused on girls, and yet most of that attention is the problems facing girls and the fact that girls suffer from violence and don't get to go to school. And while I do think that that's obviously really important, I also think it's really important that we change global mindsets. So exactly, you know, as some of my fellow panelists mentioned, helping understand, have the global community really understand that girls do have the power to not only transform their own lives, but their families and their communities. And the truth is that girls really are not victims. Girls are leaders and powerful agents of change. And so I started an organization called Let Girls Lead that really invests in girls and their allies doing leadership development, advocacy, and storytelling so that girl leaders and then also other civil society leaders could really share different strategies to achieve scale for girls. So, you know, for example, we've partnered quite a bit with the Girl Up at the UN Foundation, who's been an incredible partner for our work. And a couple years ago, the UN Foundation commissioned an evaluation demonstrating that our work has been able to benefit over 3 million girls in Africa and Latin America through this model of leadership development, advocacy, and storytelling. And the way we do it is really through in-country leaders. So for example, in Liberia, we've worked since 2010 with a young woman named Rosanna Shack, who when she came into our program had the only safe home for girls in Liberia. So because of the conflict and the post-conflict, 75% of girls and women in Liberia have been victims of violence. And Rosanna had the only safe home for girls. So gave 25 girls a chance to go to school, a chance to learn new skills so that they could have an income and a safe place to live. And so she was doing this amazing work and was already an incredible leader. And when she came into our program, she realized that there was no law in place that protected girls from violence. And so she was able to launch a campaign with support and funding from us and in partnership with other participants in Let Girls Lead's network that led to passage of one of the most progressive laws for children in all of Africa. So it's the National Children's Law of Liberia that guarantees children's health and education and outlaws child marriage and harmful traditional practices. So really going from reaching those 25 girls, Rosanna is now reaching over 2 million girls in Liberia. And that's really the model of what we do and what we're focused on. And working with and for girls has always been a personal passion of mine. I think I came to this work as a girl myself. When I was 12 years old, I was traveling with my parents and saw the inequality and the injustice that girls in Argentina, which is where my mom is from, face. And it just really transformed my own view of the world and my own desire to create change for girls who are living in marginalized communities in poor countries around the world. So that's really what brought me to it. I now have 2 little girls myself, and so have additional commitment, even more kind of from a different angle as a parent, and seeing the opportunities that my 2 daughters have, and really wanting that girls everywhere can have what they have, which is to be able to go to school and live somewhere safe and go see a doctor when they need one. And I think that drives much of the work that I'm continuing to do through Let Girls Lead.
Great, great. That's so interesting. And Rosanna's story, that's amazing. That's great. How about you, Vivian?
So I'm very passionate about improving the lives of girls around the world, because every day, whenever I talk about myself, I always tell people I'm a product of giving. I was born in rural Kenya in a community that did not value girls' education, and recently I graduated from college, and I'm one of the first girls to have a bachelor's degree from my community. So looking back from where I came from, if I didn't have my education today, I'll be one of the statistics that's going to be presented at the General Assembly in September this year. I'll be one of those girls who don't have a voice. I'll be one of those girls who can make choices for themselves. I'll be one of those girls who was married off at an early age. I'll be one of those girls languishing in poverty. But that story changed, and I believe it has changed for the best. And today, it's because of the investment in my education. Somebody invested in my education and saw that it was right for me to have an access to quality education. And because of my education, I have the freedom today to speak on behalf of other young girls. And I also have my own voice, and I have the ability to make my own choices. And every day we see all these atrocities that young girls face. Look at the Chibok girls who were abducted last year, April, and up to today, they've not been rescued. And then the other day, we had a 10-year-old girl who was used to bomb one of the Nigerians are having a really difficult time to explore their potential because of some of the cultural norms, and also because of just barbaric way of thinking, to be honest. Because there's just no way you can go to abduct a young girl who is trying to create something for her life. Young girls are very innocent. Going to accessing education should never be a case of security. Should never be a case of am I going to be safe? Should I let my child go to school, or should I stay with her in the house illiterate, but I'm going to have her for as long as I can have her? So it makes parents have all these tough decisions to make, and I totally understand where they're coming from. But if we don't raise our voices, we who have the opportunity, we who have the platform, then who do we expect to do that? And then that in itself is a form of injustice, because you're already seeing the injustice happening in our community, and we decide to be quiet. And that's why I can't afford to be quiet. I have been elevated from poverty, and today I have a voice and I have a platform. And that's why I see it in myself as a responsibility and as a global citizen to take up the challenge and speak on behalf of other girls from my community, from my country, and also at a global level because of the platform. So girls, when you talk about girls' issues, there are issues that are very personal to me, having come out of that, and also still seeing more other young girls struggling to come out of poverty, trying to make choices for themselves, trying to access quality education, trying to access quality healthcare, which are basic needs that should be there but are not there. So I'm just doing my responsibility to represent and also create a platform and start dialogues with constructive actions towards making sure that every other girl has an opportunity to quality education and has the freedom and liberation to make their own choices in life.
Wow, you have such an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that and for showing us what the difference investing in a girl's education can make. So thank you for that. Karen, what about you? What drives your passion?
When I was a young girl in about the 5th grade or so, I found this series of books about women leaders, and I just became fascinated with them. And I would go down to the library every Saturday and sit in the downstairs basement and read books about Golda Meir and Amelia Earhart and many other famous women and the accomplishments that they did. And it just really sparked my interest. It really inspired me to strive myself to do better things with my life. And I knew from an early age that I felt like I wanted to be a social worker. I wanted to do something to help people, and that's what really motivated and drove me, in particular, helping young girls. I feel that girls need that extra mentor. They need that little bit of help and push and someone who encourages them. And I did that for my younger sister. And I did that for a lot of young women when I was in college. And I've done a lot of volunteer work throughout my life that has always been focused on helping women and girls, because I really think that they need that support, and we need that support as individuals as well. And it gives me great gratitude and satisfaction to be able to feel like I made a tiny difference. And it doesn't take much to help a girl think big and think large and think about what great opportunities she has in her life.
That's great. I feel the same way. I love helping people too, especially girls. And I believe that all girls, no matter where they live, should have the same rights that I have, and no girl should be treated as second-class citizens. So I love that as a teen advisor, I'm able to advocate on behalf of these girls and help them. So my next question is, how would you like to see adolescent girls included in the Sustainable Development Goals? And what are some of the issues that you feel are most important and that should really be included in them? Hazami, would you like to start us off?
I think, as I noted earlier, and first I'm very moved by everyone's very passionate stories about why they're doing what they're doing. I think we need to see more passion involved in the Sustainable Development Goals first and foremost. I think one of the biggest things that we can do, and I'm very, very proud to be working with the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth's Office to here at the United Nations to really create campaigns to enable and to facilitate the voice of young people in influencing through kind of mobilizing their voices the development goals. I don't know if you guys are all familiar, but there's a wonderful campaign called the My World Survey, which received over 7 million votes from around the world. And ultimately, it looked at asking young people and people in general around the world to have a voice in developing ultimately the future that we're all not only going to inherit, but are currently living in and creating actively. So I think, you know, having more voices of young girls mobilizing around sustainable development goals and being able to really insert, as I noted earlier, women and girls and kind of social inclusion into all the different areas like climate and energy and all the various other issues, you know, finance and several of the other areas that are key, education. And I think that that's going to be one of the biggest challenges, is how do we really really reach to the people around the world that are most impacted by these decisions. We know, and we keep hearing ample stories about young girls who live in areas, rural areas, that cannot go to school because of the reality of the necessity of having to earn an income or having to walk X amount of miles to get water or food or things along those lines. And I think those stories need to become not only fluff stories that make us all happy and make us all feel empathetic for about a minute and a half, but really, really start to be at the forefront of our decision making. And that is a challenge that we have as a community. I think that's exactly what Action 2015 aims to do, is it aims to bridge that gap between the world and the processes, and really figure out how do you create mechanisms to allow young girls to start mobilizing themselves to influence these decisions and not just be recipients of decisions that impact their lives. I personally come from the Middle East. I am a Muslim and an Arab woman, and I feel a very strong need to advocate for inclusion also from my part of the world. And I think it's increasingly troubling when we do not have representation, geographic, ethnic, religious representation in these decision-making capacities, which is constantly the case. I speak from my own personal experience when I walk into a room on Arab development issues and there is not a single Arab in the room. I find that not only very troubling, but also and unsettling, but also we need to, again, ask for more accountability to include young voices in creating programming that do impact young people's lives. So that's kind of, I think, the goals that I have would be to really encourage young girls to get involved. Our office here at the Secretary General's office, Youth Envoy's office, is doing a lot of work to mobilize young people, and we encourage you all to get involved with what we're doing this year to kind of think through the next phase in development agenda setting.
Okay, yes, definitely. Really, I agree that giving these girls a voice is so very important. Denise, what about you? How would you like to see adolescent girls included?
I really believe that girls need to be a key priority in the new development agenda. Girls are key to achieving real sustainable development globally, and we can't pretend otherwise. You know, the Millennium Development Goals only made a specific mention of girls in one target, and that was the one on education. So I really feel that as the Sustainable Development Goal process evolves, having girls at the center of identifying their own needs, their own priorities, their own goals, their own hopes and their own vision for not only their own future but for their countries is really critical. And having girls have a voice at the table and being a part of the global conversation as we set the new Sustainable Development Goals is critical. So I really agree with what Hazami said. I think that girls need to be integrated in a standalone gender goal specifically, and also need to be integrated throughout all of the other goals that are part of the agenda. I think for us, it's been really exciting to see not only that we believe that it's important, but in fact actually that girls are capable of creating these changes. We just recently launched the Girls' Voices Initiative with UNICEF, and we're working in 4 countries in Africa and Latin America to engage girls between the ages of 10 and 19 to really raise their own voices and advocate for their own priorities. So both at the country level on advocating for girls' priorities in terms of health, education, livelihoods, and rights in national development plans, and also as part of the global agenda. So having girls at the table in New York with decision makers where their voices can be heard and their priorities can be realized. And I think it's amazing to be in this conversation, and really having girls feed into conversations like these, both virtually and in New York and the country level, is what's going to be critical to achieving the potential that we have for the Sustainable Development Goals.
I too agree that it's so critical to make sure that girls have a voice at the table as well. What about you, Vivian? How would you like to see girls included?
So first of all, we have to let people. Okay, so the most interesting thing. So we've had Millennium Development Goals, and I don't know whether Millennium Development Goals were only meant to remain at the UN premises. When you get out, nobody actually knows about the Millennium Development Goals. If you ask them of the 8 goals, they're like, what are you talking about? So now that we are transitioning to the Sustainable Development Goals, one of the key steps to take is to first make sure that people really understand what are Sustainable Development Goals. And they're not only for the world leaders to come and talk about it at the UN and live, or they're not papers to greet each other, ambassadors to exchange between themselves, and that's the end to the conversation. So as of now, we have the 17 proposed sustainable development goals with 169 targets. And according to the draft, goal number 5 is on achieve gender equality and empower women and girls with 10 specific targets. So I love the fact that they have 10 specific targets, but I think one of the reasons why there's a problem with the Millennium Development Goals, it wasn't very specific. And now that we want to bring girls at the center of the conversation on sustainable development goals, make sure that we eradicate early girl child marriage, violence against women, make sure girls have access to quality education, access to quality healthcare, access to clean water and sanitation. Just last year, 2 girls in India, they were raped and killed while they were looking for a place to relieve themselves. That should not happen in the 21st century, but that's the reality of where we are living in today. So as we move and transition into SDGs, let's make sure that we have country-specific targets on issues concerning women and girls before we move to global targets. Because then when you start from global and you trickle down, most of the people, all the conversations is left at the global. So when you come to national and then you go to community level, nobody really has an idea of what needs to be done or where do they come in to make sure that they make their tangible contribution to making sure that girls have equal opportunities as the boy child and their needs are addressed with proper actions that are more sustainable in the long run. So I think that's where I feel like when we are moving on to sustainable development goals, make sure that girls' issues are at the core center of the discussion. They are brought at the table to speak on their issues and not somebody else to speak for them. But also make sure that we target specific countries we have targets for specific countries and not leave the conversation just at the global level, because there's no country that's called global and there's nobody that's called global.
Yes, you made some really great points, and I definitely agree that raising awareness about these goals is very important, especially for people my age. I don't think any of my friends know what the Sustainable Development Goals are, what they're about, and what we want them to do and how we want them to help the world, and especially girls. So I think that's very important to raise awareness about it and educate people about this. Okay, so there's been a lot of talk about the need to get everyone involved, including boys and men. How can we do this? How can we get people involved in this movement to empower girls? Hazami, why don't you start us off?
I absolutely, I applaud these initiatives, and I know we have representatives from UN Women with us, but one of the most exciting events I attended last year at the UN was the He for She event, and I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, we have to have advocacy networks for development of society, and women are part of society. So it seems really odd to me that people applauded what was such a simple concept of men standing up for women, and they were so taken aback by how revolutionary this was. I think more and more of that needs to happen. I think when we talk about empowering women economically too, the reality is that most of the donor community does tend to be male. We need to really have more advocates amongst males to empower and support different genders across the board. So I think having these conversations is increasingly important, but then also I am very much an advocate of not having women panels that are all women-based. And that being said, with all due respect to all of our panelists and myself, I think we need to have more men speaking about the empowerment of women. We need to have more diversity in these conversations as a whole, and I think that's something that needs to start changing relatively rapidly, because what we're ultimately doing is reinforcing in some ways this conversation that women's development is a women's issue. Women's development is not a women's issue. Youth development is not a youth issue. It should be a global issue. So I'm very encouraged to see that there is momentum. I think we need to put a lot more emphasis on really ensuring that we have advocates for women's issues that are men that can actually contribute a lot to actually making changes and helping make that happen, including in positions of power and influence, both financially and politically. So, you know, I think the He for She campaign is a wonderful start at that. I loved seeing the map just populate around the world with young men standing up, and not only young men, but all men standing up and saying, yes, I am a man who supports gender equality. And I think, you know, that those types of initiatives definitely are something that we need to draw more momentum around.
Yeah, that's great. I definitely agree. I've had some boys start coming to my Girl Up club meetings at my school, so that's really big, and we've been educating them about it and everything. So, Denise, how about you?
Yeah,
How would you?
I think that really it's key to engage men and boys, and I think there are a lot of strategies that can be really effective in doing it. You know, for example, our partners in Malawi are really focused on ending child marriage, and so the Girls Empowerment Network of Malawi, who we work most closely with, decided what they really wanted to do was engage girls and their allies, so and boys and men, in a strategy that would end child marriage in southern Malawi. And so they launched what's called the Stop Child Marriage Project. And essentially what they did was bring girls together to learn about their rights, to learn skills so that they could advocate for those rights. And then they started a campaign where these girls, young, very young girls, but you know, from 10 onwards, were able to advocate with village chiefs. So mostly male village chiefs, though there are also women village chiefs who are very powerful. They were able to advocate with village chiefs to pass bylaws so that a man who marries a girl under the age of 21 has his land taken away from him and has to pay a fee of 7 goats. So, you know, in Malawi, where more than half of girls are married before they're 18, this group of girls has been really strategic about how they engage men and boys in a conversation and in advocacy at the community level to transform not just the laws, but also the social norms, the cultural norms, the economic incentives for child marriage. So I really think that there are strategic and effective ways to do that, and by investing in in-country partners, they identify and can respond most effectively to the challenges and opportunities that they see. So, I mean, I really think that this is a movement that everyone can and needs to get involved in. And to me, I mean, there are kind of 3 simple ways to do that. You know, the first I always talk about is to wear girl glasses, right? So, you know, whether you're a mom in Ohio or a dad in Malawi, to really try to look at the world through the eyes of a girl, whether it's your daughter or a girl in your community, and try to understand what are her hopes, what are her dreams, and how can you help her achieve them. So I think that's one piece. The second is really to advocate. So be an advocate and recognize the power that you have, and ask your elected officials to support laws and policies and programs, and especially budgets that benefit girls. And then the last one is to really invest. You know, whether you give $10 or you give $10,000, invest in programs that improve girls' opportunities to finish school, have access to health care, and be able to pursue their own dreams wherever they may be. So I think those are a few different ideas. You know, we have on our website, which is letgirlslead.org, we have lots of other resources and campaigns and toolkits that folks can use to think about how to create change for girls, whether very locally in their own communities or at a global level.
That's great. Those 3 points, those are really good. And I love how with the Child Marriage Project that you were talking about, that they really did engage the men in that. I think that's really, really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it seems obvious in a way, but I mean, they've literally been able to end child marriage in southern Malawi and protect thousands of girls from becoming child brides. And if they had just been doing it by working with girls and women, they never would have gotten there. So I think we just need to be both strategic and realistic about the fact that we really are a global community, and by engaging all of our members, that's how we can create change that's good for everyone.
Yes, exactly. Karen, what about you?
I think everybody's made some incredibly good points, and I guess when I think about a successful campaign, which is what you really need, is a major advocacy campaign, is you have to figure out how to win the hearts and the minds at the same time. So you need to have the facts and the figures. You need to know your issue well. And the great thing about focusing on adolescent girls is we have a great story. We have wonderful things to say. We've got a lot of moral legitimacy with what we're talking about, and people will, it's an issue that will be difficult to disagree with. And so you really need, you've got that authority, you've got that moral authority to make this argument. And then you just really need to involve a ton of people. The second thing is just having masses involved in promoting this campaign. And there are so many efforts now going on to support adolescent girls that I think something really important as we move toward the Sustainable Development Goals is to really collaborate more and to unify some of these campaigns and really help get some synergy going where they build on each other. Because there's just a lot of good things going on, and I think we need to elevate the issue by already taking some of this great work and really trying to get an umbrella around it to promote it, and getting some great spokespeople that people respect, I think are critically important.
Definitely, yes. I definitely agree.
I forgot. I really think engaging the faith-based community is critically important because they are really influential leaders in a lot of the communities where we want to make a difference.
Yes, definitely. Great point.
Simone, can I ask you, if I can just ask you, you're the youngest person on this panel and you're a girl, so I wonder, what do you see as strategies that either have worked for you or that you think could work for other girls?
Let's see. Definitely, I know some of you guys covered this, but just like raising awareness, especially with people my age, I really feel like my generation, getting them involved is so key. With the statistics and like the stories you guys have shared, just all of that, I know it has a really big impact. Everything that I'm learning through this has definitely opened my eyes and inspired me, and I feel like if we can share that with more people and kids my age, it would be great and make a really big impact, and just there's power in numbers, so I'm definitely all for the campaigns and raising awareness and everything like that. So
that's great.
Yes. So I have another question that I'd love to know. What do you guys think has been what progress do you think has been made towards achieving gender equality? Hazami, one. Okay.
Sorry. I just wanted to go back to the previous question that we asked on how to engage boys in the conversation. And I know Hazami has talked a little bit about he for she, and it's very interesting because today, just before the Google Hangout, there was a barbershop conference at the UN, a high-level meeting on engaging men on gender issues. And we know very well that gender issues like gender equality are human rights issues, and we can't only have the females talk about gender issues. We have to incorporate the male into the conversation to make sure that the solutions that we are coming with are sustainable and both voices are incorporated. Because when you look at the girls that we are talking about, there are sisters, there are mothers, there are aunts, there are grandmothers, and we can leave the male gender or the boy child out of the equation. They have to be part of the equation for it to balance. And so we have the He for She campaign that was launched by UN Women on engaging the men on gender issues, and anybody can sign online and be part of the movement. And also just a short story that I want to share with you. So today we had a 13-year-old boy who shared a statement at the event. And this young boy, Max Bryant, last year he organized an event in his community in New Jersey and raised enough funds to take care of tuition for 18 girls for a whole year. Tuition for 18 girls for a whole year. And this is a 13-year-old boy. He would have decided to do a fundraising for toys or for candy for kids in his school, but he decided to focus on girls' education in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is a young boy talking about gender issues. So it doesn't matter really about the age, or it doesn't matter where you're coming from. It's about having that heart and being aware, as you had said, being aware of the issues that are going on around the world. He learned through Malala of the inequalities that girls face around the world, and he decided to take the initiative and address the issue in the best way he could as a young boy. So also engaging the boy child or engaging the males in gender issues should start from the classrooms, should start from the schools, should start from the families. The way we see our sisters treated, the way we see our sisters are treated is the same way when you step out you want to treat your girlfriend, and then when you grow up you want to treat your wife. So if you're brought up in a family that respects each other, then that culture is inculcated in you, and when you grow up, that's the same way you treat other female people around you, and that's the same way you're going to treat your wife, and that's the same way you're going to treat your co-workers. So the responsibilities goes back to teachers at school, and also goes back to our families back at home. How do we treat our girls? How do we teach boys to treat girls or talk to girls or address issues that are concerning our girls? So the education plays a very, very critical role, and also the family fabric too plays a very major role.
That's a great point. Sorry,
yeah, I'll just go ahead and jump in because I actually agree, and I'm, you know, I very much applaud initiatives like the Barbershop Conference, which the name in and of itself, hosting a barbershop conference at the UN, people were like, what is barbershop? You're bringing haircutting folks to the UN, but it's really trying to get to the heart of, again, where males tend to congregate and where these socially accepted things do get ingrained into the societal and cultural norms that then ultimately become embedded in kind of how things are done and just taken that way and not challenged. I think, you know, you asked if there's been an increase. I mean, when I gave the statistic about women in parliament and in elected positions, that's an 11% increase from 1995, which it's not that large of a amount of people, but it is an increase. That is relatively notable considering how low it was prior to that, so it's doubled. I mean, I think it's important to note that there are 31 million girls that are not in primary school, 34 million adolescent girls are not in school in general, and a very large number of the 774, I believe it is, million illiterate people in the world are women. So I do agree with Vivian that an emphasis and an investment into education is going to be critical, and I know Karen also mentioned this earlier, and you know, among the first questions, which, you know, the longer women or the more educated women are, the more likely that they're not going to get into child marriages, the more likely they are going to be able to earn economic income and thus kind of be able to provide a livelihood. And I think that one thing that we need to continue to do is to contextualize issues that impact girls and youth around the world. I mean, just talking about child marriages, I'm Syrian, and we look at the refugee crisis that's happening right now in Jordan, which is considered one of the worst humanitarian crisis in the world since World War II. And you're looking at this massive number of young girls that are unfortunately being sold into these child marriages. And now when we look at that, it's easy for us to step back and say, oh my goodness, this is a horrific, archaic practice. However, the reality is this is happening because of lack of economic opportunity, lack of safe environments, lack of housing and capacity in these refugee camps. So again, I think it's really important for us to deconstruct a lot of the statistics that we get thrown around that oftentimes allow us to reinforce incorrect understandings of the state of global affairs and the state of development. And I think there has to be more accountability in showcasing why things are happening the way they are, why in certain societies and communities, you know, women are increasingly not allowed to go to school. Is it simply that people don't believe in education of women, or is it that they have to work in order for their family to be able to make an income? So I think it is very important for us to have these conversations in context, and that I do see hope, and I see more and more and more emphasis on these conversations, which I think is a promising direction that we're moving towards.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If I can jump in too, I think it's really critical to consider the ways in which the economic, the social, the cultural barriers are connected, and really look again at the piece, you know, again to our theme today of investing in girls and seeing that girls can actually serve as their own spokespersons for their own rights, for their own needs, and really not just ensure that there are programs that benefit girls, but also that there are policies and especially budgets that benefit girls. So, for example, in Malawi, we work with a group of girl leaders who, this is an indigenous community, in Guatemala, an indigenous community in Guatemala where literally less than 10% of indigenous girls finish primary school. Right, so more than 90% of girls drop out of school by the time they're 12, and more than half have their first baby by the time they're 18. And this group of girls decided that what they needed really was funding for programs, for scholarship programs, and for programs that enabled girls to stay in school and avoid an unwanted pregnancy, so to access contraception and health services. And so the girls launched this incredible campaign, and they went and they met with their mayor, and they told him what they needed. And I wasn't there for this meeting, but apparently Elba, one of the leaders from the group, stood up. She's 16 years old, indigenous Mayan girl. She stood up to speak, and the mayor literally almost laughed her out of the office, just looked her in the face and laughed out loud and said, why are you wasting my time? I have important things to do in governing this town. Why don't you go home? And Elba and the girls obviously were devastated, but they kept it up, and they went on TV, and they were on local radio, and they engaged religious leaders and parents and community leaders and indigenous leaders in really having a dialogue and in encouraging people to think differently about the importance of investing in girls. And eventually actually won the mayor over, and he's now one of their best allies, and he actually signed legislation that he co-wrote with the girls that increases girls' access to education and schooling and health services. And to me, one of the most important pieces is he actually put a line item in the annual budget that ensures that there's funding to support programs for girls both in health and education. Because I think without the funding piece, again, getting back to our theme of investing in girls, we can talk a lot about it, there can be a lot of great political goodwill, with some places even have amazing laws and policies, but if there isn't that money in place to enable girls to achieve their own goals and their own objectives, whether at the local level, the national level, or in this global development conversation we're having through the Sustainable Development Goals, it's not going to happen. So really finding ways to make sure that those finances are there to support all of the good intentions and all of the research focused on girls.
I actually just have a quick quote to share based on Denise. This is a quote I use a lot when I do youth engagement work, is we wait for leaders to come rescue us instead of becoming leaders and rescuing ourselves. And I think, getting more young women to mobilize themselves and to not ask permission to mobilize, but to start doing it, and then ultimately people will follow, and you will get hushed up, but you need to take initiative and not expect anyone to just give you your rights. You need to start demanding them. So empowering women to take, young girls to take initiative and to believe in their own futures and their own dreams is something that I think should also be really emphasized.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, we just created a film called Girls Behind the Camera of girls telling their own stories, and we're going to be premiering it during UNCSW. So for anyone who's watching, if you're going to be in New York in mid-March, we'd love to have you come join us.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Actually, Denise, at our last Teen Advisor weekend, we watched the movie of the story that you told us about. It was such an awesome movie. I recommend it to anyone. It's called Poder. Such a great movie. And I love when you guys are talking about education, I believe that's so key as well. I know that's something big that we deal with the Girl Up, and one of our slogans is, when you educate a girl, you educate a nation. So we definitely think that's so very important. If anyone has any last remarks, closing remarks they would like to say really quick, that would be great. Feel free to go ahead.
I would like to share with you a quote the UN Women Executive Director shared with us today at the Barbershop Conference, and she said that achieving gender equality means disrupting status quo and not negotiating it. And I think I kind of tied it up with the new documentary that's being released by Nicholas Christopher and Cheryl Wooden, A Path Appears. It shows the different atrocities that girls in the community face, but also shows the brighter side of women power and how some young girls have overcome these atrocities and adversities to become young leaders in their community, and also to be able to effect change, and also how they have involved the men in advocating and being engaged on gender issues. So A Path Appears comes out on PBS on January 26th, and I think everybody should watch it out so that we can know exactly what's happening on the ground, but also how to bring that conversation to the table and say how we can be able to have the voices of young girls represented at the table, but also having them share their stories just as they've shared in this documentary.
Simone, this is Karen. I'd just like to thank you so much for your own personal leadership and in organizing this Google Hangout. You should be really, really impressed. You know, you've done a wonderful thing. I hope there's millions of people who are going to be listening in and watching this, and it will be replayed on YouTube or other places. It will inspire them and encourage them to do great things with their lives. So thank you for inviting me and letting me participate.
Agreed.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Okay, well, I would like to thank everyone for tuning in and watching. I'd like to thank all the panelists that joined me today. Thank you, Karen, Vivian, Hazami, and Denise for taking time out to answer my questions and talk to me today. I really appreciate it. I've learned so much, and I know everyone watching has learned so much as well. And just thank you, everybody.
Thank
Don't
you.
forget,
This has been
also
great.
remember that alone we are strong, but together we are stronger, and continue to tweet about this and use the hashtag Action 2015. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Very much.